Hello, my darlings, and welcome back to This is Mariya. In this episode, we're talking about the ending of the cycle, the time that we find ourselves in right now, why this time is so special, why it is absolutely not random that you have shown up on planet Earth right now. What are we ending? What are we beginning? And I will share a few interesting facts and peculiarities, if you will, around how souls usually plan incarnations in the times that we live in. What determines how higher selves think about what is important, what experiences are pivotal as, they are going through an incarnation on Earth in this pivotal time. Now, before we dive in, I wanted to let you know that apart from making videos like this one, I also host healing circles. There's usually about one circle every other month, or about one circle a month, depending. And we dive into a variety of topics. We usually come together to heal a particular facet of our energy. And the sessions are usually very deep. They're channeled. There's a lot of light language involved. There's deep journeying, a lot of meditations. So for a list of all the past healings that I did, you can check out thisismariya.com and go under past workshops. We also have some live events, so you can check out the live events section on the website as well. All right, let's talk about the ending of the cycle. The time that we are living in right now is an incredible time because humanity as a species is coming to the end of one cycle and potentially the beginning of another. There are, I would call it the point of convergence. So there are multiple micro and macro cycles that are converging in this one spot, in this one time and place, if you will. And so it's a number of circles or cycles that are ending, and then hopefully we'll begin anew. One of the transitions that you've all undoubtedly heard of if you are on the spiritual path is the transition from a third density to the fifth density. And that is very much the ending of one cycle and the beginning of another. We're also finishing up a 24,000-year cycle, 12x or 12 multiplied by 2,000 years, which is kind of like one of the microcycles that usually at the level of the human species, every 24,000 years or so, humanity goes through a loop where we start from the beginning and then we come into the final days and then we start it all over again. And every 24,000 years, there's a big learning. There's a big unfolding. There is the test at the end, the exam, if you will. There are other cycles. If you've watched some of my past videos, you know that the sun, our local sun, has been undergoing a transition for the past few years, and it is transitioning from a masculine energy into a feminine energy. And so that is a massive, massive transition. What that usually does to a solar system is that usually shifts how the planets interact with one another, as well as it does shift how the deck is stacked, meaning it changes the value system. It changes the vibrations, the emanations. It shifts the powers that be, if you will. Planets get nurtured very differently. Planets get to evolve very differently under a female sun compared to a male sun. And a lot of codes that have never been downloaded by planet Earth as a collective consciousness before are being downloaded right now at unprecedented speeds by Mother Gaia as she is adjusting to the abundant and bountiful rays of the new sun. There are other cycles that are ending. But the one thing you need to know is we're at, towards the end, we're towards the final mile. There are certain things that are characteristic of the so-called end times. Now, when I say the end times, I don't mean that there's nothing after. That is, that couldn't be further from the truth. There will be life after this, for sure. There will be a new cycle, and usually in a new cycle, there's a whole new intention for the cycle. And I think what really pertains to this episode today and what I wanted to talk to you about is what usually happens at the end of the cycle, planetarily speaking, but also how does your higher self perceive the happening? And what is it going to want to optimize for as it wants to bring you into this incarnation? So things that are very common to the end times are large, massive releases of karma. So one of the things that is ending is a karmic cycle, right? That's what we mean. So the journey that we have been on collectively is about to come to an end. That means that all of the loose ends need to be tied. All of our I's need to be dotted. All of our T's need to be crossed. That way, we don't have to carry all of that karma into the new cycle, so we can truly start from the blank slate. Because only when you start from the blank slate, you get to really truly decide and make a choice, not really be limited by your past experiences. So that is very much the intention. So there is a desire at the higher self level towards the end of every cycle. And we just happen to find ourselves at this convergence spot where a lot of things are ending, right? So that desire is amplified and accentuated compared to the traditional or the normal, quote unquote, ending cycle. So this one is that times, I don't know, times 100. So your higher self would always look into all the experiences that it had on a particular planet for the entire duration of the cycle. The good, the bad, the ugly, all of the experiences that it had. And then, of course, your higher self is going to look at all of the loose ends. And there are usually a lot of commonalities because as you go through the cycle, a lot of the karma gets resolved along the way. It gets re-uploaded back into your personal Akashic records as, memories, as learning, as experience. You can call it many different things. At the same time, there are some massive knots that may remain up until the last days for many different reasons. It could be that you tried to address certain karmic knots before and you were not successful. It could be that you require a certain set of circumstances to unfold for you to be able to align with the events in your life that would enable you to unravel that karma. And it may also happen that certain wounds are really deep and you just didn't get a chance to work through the depth of all of that emotion. So, therefore, usually the end of the cycle is a very charged period. It's a very hot period from the perspective of the higher self because every higher self possible that has intentions to close down karmic loops is going to want to incarnate at the end times, right? So all, to get the opportunity and to get the proper energies, to get that momentum, the collective momentum that may enable it to unravel some of the past karma. So souls actually, it's not uncommon for the last days column or the end of the cycle for a soul to have multiple points of reference and multiple incarnations all at the same time. You may think of them as parallel lives. So parallel lives are extremely common for the end of the cycle. The reason being is if you have a large karmic knot or two, you want to make sure that your chances of dealing with that karma are optimal. And that can only happen if you have a lot of tries or a lot of players on the board all at the same time. Now, as you are stacking your players, you will, a lot of them or most of them may be working through the same exact issue or set of issues that you haven't addressed yet in the past, but they may be doing so from a slightly different angle. So you may find that a lot of these parallel lives have a lot of commonalities if you actually look at them. For instance, they may all be the same gender. They may all be even the same phenotype. They may all have a very similar set of circumstances that you are born into. Call it like being born into a family of very modest means and having to work your way through that or work your way through poverty. Or for instance, you may choose to come with a certain chronic condition and do so in like 10 different avatars, 10 different incarnations of yours all at the same time, and just slightly tweak some of the other circumstances or some of the other parameters to see how you're able to best deal with this. So what is characteristic of the end times outside of the fact that everyone wants to incarnate and a lot of souls choose to have multiple avatars? So it's actually, funnily enough, way more common than ever before right now to find that recognition in others, which is the recognition at soul level or at the monad level, at the level of oneness, where it's almost like you look at another being and they feel so familiar to you, but it's not familiar like a soulmate. It's not familiar like a twin flame, and it's not familiar like a karmic relationship from a past life. It's familiar as if you shared the same soul. You're like, wow, this is like my mirror. This is the person that has the same exact trauma that I do and almost looks the same way as I do, and almost like has the same level of aspirations that I do. And the reason being is you could be sharing an oversoul. And again, it is not terribly, terribly common, but it can happen during the last days. Other things, the soup of happening is very thick, meaning the events, the external circumstances on the planet are usually quite dense. There's a lot that's going on. And it's almost like the pressure in the pressure cooker is getting higher and higher and higher. And so there is usually a lot of turmoil and all kinds of challenges for societies that are going through the end of the cycle. It could be unexpected things, or maybe expected things, depending on which perspective you're looking at, but things like wars, things like revolutions get accentuated. Like there are way more of them towards the end of the cycle than ever before. Things like political intrigue and all kinds of power grabs, all kinds of shadows start to come out into the open. Some of the things that you're witnessing right now is the rise of the celebrity as an archetype. There are a lot of famous people right now alive on planet Earth, comparatively speaking to what is normal for planet Earth. So there are a lot of people and a lot of different mediums through which you can become, quote unquote, famous, right? A lot of the people on TV, a lot of the people and a lot of actors and actresses now on streaming websites, etc. That, all kinds of exposure that has not been available before. Social media, right? Not that that is traditionally fame, or not that that type of fame, or social media fame, is the same thing as true celebrity. However, it is a similar type of vibration and a similar type of challenge on social media as well. So you will see a lot of that during the end times. Cataclysms, unfortunately, are not uncommon for the end of the cycle. All kinds of reassessments in relationships and what it means, and gender identification and sexuality are very common for the end of the cycle, because some people still need to work through that energy. And so a lot of these, call it deviations from what used to be considered normal, would start coming through towards the end of the cycle. Just a large reassessment of societal values and big shakeups. Usually it's large transformation in how people do business, right? So they merge in, they call it the invention of the internet, right? And AI is really shifting society. Technology is also not to be discounted. So there's a lot of change always in the end days. And the reason being is because all of these souls are optimizing to have as many experiences that are shake-up kind of experiences, or challenging experiences, or just invigorating experiences as you can possibly think of, because everybody wants to check all of the boxes and kind of like, it's almost like everybody has a bucket list and they're like, okay, well, I haven't done 10 things on that list and I'm trying to fit this all into one lifetime. Here we go. Usually the pace of change is a lot slower. And now literally every 10 years, it feels like you're living in a new world because the world has shifted. And it will only continue to keep accelerating. So that pace of innovation is going to continue to accelerate, because new and new challenges are required by all of these people coming in and incarnating. So at the same time, you have the population growth, right? Again, more souls need more bodies. 2, at the same time, you have unprecedented death rates, right? From certain things like cancer, for instance, right? Or certain things come out of nowhere, like a pandemic, for instance, right? Like you have unprecedented death rates. Why does that happen, right? It's because some people, in order to clear up their karma, need to align with a challenge such as a pandemic, or align with a challenge such as a terminal disease, to see how they would deal and work through that karma. If we look at the planet Earth, a lot of the shadows are being dealt with right now. One of the core shadows that's coming up collectively, not individually, for planet Earth right now is power, that thirst for power, and power at all costs, and influence and control. And you see a lot of that in politics, right? So not too long ago, this planet was the planet of monarchy, or call it the developed world, was that was very much the predominant agenda in the political scene. And now, of course, with the monarchy, there is that concept of inheritance, and there is a certain lesson to be learned there. The challenge with the monarchy, it's a much more stable system. And sometimes certain monarchs, if they're good and if the times are good and if they're not challenged, they stay ruling a particular territory for decades. Sometimes like 50 years, you won't see a change in the monarch. Whereas in the institution of the presidency, call it, it's very different. So there are, on average, elections every 4 years, sometimes it's 6 years, depending on the country. And as a general rule, now there are exceptions to every rule, a lot more people get to experience that role of the chief executive of the country, right? The chief decision maker of the country, which used to be reserved for kings and queens, right? For the monarchs. And the reason being is because there are a lot of souls with a lot of shadow aspects that have to do with political power and controlling others and influencing others from the political perspective. There are so many souls out there that want to have these experiences that the institution of the democracy had to be created. Like the election cycles had to be created because it's almost like the cycles are really good because they allow, like they begin and they end. And at the end of the cycle, you get to change presidents and you get to change a lot of other things, right? And so a lot more souls get to experience that level of control over others in a very short period of time. And so that accentuates and accelerates the learning for everybody, right? The same truth can also be applied to the shadow of fame and a lot of people wanting to be famous. Why are so many people obsessed with the idea of wanting to be famous these days? It is because it's the end of the cycle. So if you have, in past lives, either experienced fame and experienced the painful byproduct of fame or being known, or if you really wanted to become famous but didn't get a chance to be, in this lifetime, you may come with this incessant desire to want to be out there, want to be in the spotlight, and for the people to know you and to recognize you. I'm not saying that every single person that becomes renowned is driven by that idea. Some people are accidentally famous. Some people just want to help others, and that's why, they're doing what they're doing. Of course, there are many, many different reasons why somebody's in the spotlight, but there is one reason that has really, call it, taken over and created the proliferation of social media platforms, etc., which is a lot of people want to deal with the shadow aspect of fame, because fame, just like money, reveals who you are, at least to yourself, if not to others. And it also reveals and highlights some of the broken pieces of you, because you become so visible. And, the cancel culture. The cancel culture, as painful as it is to witness, for certain people, is the catalyst towards becoming whole, right? So nobody just gets canceled for nothing, right? It is usually a catalyst, whether deserved or undeserved, right? It's less about that. But, of course, from the karmic perspective, especially in the end times, there is nothing that is truly undeserved. There is nothing that is truly random. Everything is extremely well orchestrated. But all of these things, the ability for any human being on social media to receive all these comments and really check in with themselves very quickly is promoting a lot of healing. And I'm not saying that it is an easy process. No, it can be extremely depressing because, there are keyboard warriors and trolls and everybody else, right? It could be a very painful process towards, the unity within. But it could be a healing experience, right? But it is a trial by fire. A lot of souls coming into planet Earth have opted into being in the spotlight, being in the public eye, becoming public figures, and becoming scrutinized because they believe, or their higher selves believe, that that is the shortcut, the quickest path towards achieving their end goals, which is accepting the parts of themselves that they have denied, hidden, and rejected. What else? As we're looking at the end days, a lot of souls choose to explore the concept of family and what family means to them, the concept of lineage and what lineage means to them. That means that there are a lot more people than ever before being called to become child-free, because that is part of that exploration. Like, what else is there, right? There's a lot more infertility right now. And at face value, we can say, well, it is because of, the GMO and the things that we eat, and we're stuck in front of computers all day, et cetera, et cetera. Like, we can blame the food, the system, the pollution, all of it. Or we can look at it from a different perspective, a higher perspective, to understand that infertility is also a choice. And it is a choice that helps you potentially work through your past life karmic knots. And that could be many different karmic knots, right? For example, addressing the aspects of why a part of you doesn't want to be a parent, addressing the karmic knot of why you don't think you're a good parent, addressing the part of yourself that has been undernourished and undernurtured by your own parents. So the wounded child archetype, all of these things and more could potentially be the reason behind the infertility symptoms. Another symptom of the last days, the end of the cycle, is usually the spikes, are usually the spikes within terminal illness, or just very strange symptoms and just disease coming out of nowhere. Like, all of a sudden something comes, people have never heard of it before, and all of a sudden many, many people start to die. Pandemics is a good example, or any pandemic would be a good example of that. But there is a lot around heart disease, around kidney failure, around cancer, which has already been mentioned before, and so many others that are really, really flourishing these days. And again, it is the end of the cycle. And so your higher self wants to clean up and clear up as much as possible. And sometimes the biggest and the best way to give somebody a wake-up call, somebody who is embodied, somebody who is incarnated, to give them a wake-up call is to put a disease in front of them that they're going to have to face front and center. And they're going to have to make choices of how they act, given the diagnosis, given that they may only have so many, months or years to live, because that really makes a lot of people reassess what is important. That makes people go through a death and rebirth cycle while they're still incarnated, because they understand all of a sudden that they're not invincible. And they understand all of a sudden that they are not eternal beings, not yet anyhow. And when faced with their own potential for death, a lot of people change their habits. A near-death experience, right, is probably one of the bigger reasons, or the bigger precursors to awakening, right? Because it's that life-changing. It can change somebody's perspective. And you don't have to be near death. A diagnosis can also change things pretty dramatically. War and conflict, weaponized conflict, all kinds of weaponized conflicts are always the symptoms of the end of the cycle. Why? During the cycle, energies are moving. Now, as the cycle is progressing, there are usually energy blockages that emerge in different parts of the world. And they happen for different reasons. Essentially, certain things haven't been resolved throughout the cycle. And so the end days, it is usually the great time to resolve all the things that haven't been resolved. So the territories that usually have wars in the end are the ones that have historically been very prone to having wars. And so all of the conflicts that haven't been resolved at the level of society between the different countries, between the different lands, right? Between the different locales and geographical locations, all of these things are going to be bubbling up to the surface because they need to be resolved. At face value, some of these wars feel completely unfair. Some of these wars feel ridiculous and silly. It's almost like, wow, we're in the 21st century. Like, why? Why would this still be here? And the answer is because there is unresolved conflict. And there are all of these underground currents, all of these, call it feelings, thoughts, emotions. Could be broken promises, vows that haven't been upheld, power struggles. Are they better? Are we better? Why are they taking our land? Or why are they dictating to us how to live? Why does this one party feel like they're running the world? Like all kinds of things are starting to happen. And the end of the cycle is not the time to ignore these. And so towards the end of the cycle, all of these things accentuate. Now, for some of you, I'm actually getting a really, really strong in a question from the collective. Somebody's commenting that, well, what's your point? The 20th century was the century with 2 world wars. So all things considered right now is actually way better than before. Well, I'll tell you that actually from the end of the 19th century, we have already stepped into the end days. So we have already stepped into the end of the cycle. So everything in the 20th century that you have been witnessing and in the 21st is already it. So what I'm saying is this period hasn't just started yesterday. It hasn't started in 2000. It started way before. Actually, like prior to the French Revolution, just a couple of years prior to the French Revolution, is when it officially began. And so that's why you saw a lot of revolutions back to back to back, because it is the sign of the end times. And again, let me just say that the end times doesn't mean we should all run for cover. That means that we are here to address our shadow as a collective and as individuals. That is what it means. That's the only thing that it means, really. No fear-mongering, just the truth. And the truth is, if you find yourself incarnated on planet Earth right now listening to this video, it is because in this lifetime, you have come to close your personal loops. Look at your personal karma that you have accumulated, at least in the span of the last 94,000 years, and finally face the music. Finally look at the things like your deepest patterns and graduate from them, right? So this is not the lifetime to hold on to what you've always done before, right? This is the time, this is the lifetime for you to look at things from a different angle and understand that the end days are not going to be here forever. And so now is the prime time and prime opportunity to learn all of the lessons that are on your bucket list, so to speak, and check all of those boxes. How do you know, as an incarnated human, what are your biggest karmic knots? The quick way to diagnose yourself is to look at your biggest pain points in life. What are your biggest pain points? And you already know that. Like, what are the areas in your life that you, either take a disproportionate amount of your life already? Like, you naturally just gravitate towards that. Like, some people just naturally gravitate towards career. Some people just naturally gravitate towards family life and relationships. And there's nothing that they can do to weed themselves out of that, right? So the first sign that you have a karmic knot or multiple karmic knots in a particular area of your life is if you're naturally gravitating towards. It's like if you move with the tide, you're always, that water is always going to bring you to this one issue. Right? So like what area of your life takes a disproportionate amount of your attention, right? That's one. Two is, where in your life have you seen a recurring pattern in this lifetime? Like if you look at an area in your life and you're like, wow, I've seen this movie before, or like, why does this keep happening? And it could be as simple as, wow, I've been betrayed like 3 times in this lifetime already, or I've been cheated on like a number of times, or maybe you have started a job and a career to only burn out and get fired. Maybe you get fired a lot, right? Like whatever, like look at your recurring patterns. Like what are the things that keep happening to you? Because those things are always showing you that there's a pull of gravity somewhere in the happening that keeps attracting that to you. That means that you have not learned the lesson. Because the moment you learn the lesson, the pattern dissipates. Because the universe wants to get you on that next pattern because time is running short, right? So if you keep finding yourself in that vicious circle, repeating the same pattern, dating the same person, or feeling like every kid that you have keeps acting the same way towards you, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, or every friend that you have, or, keeps acting the same way, you just keep finding yourself in the same set of circumstances, analyze what is your normal way of behaving? What is your pattern? And then figure out how to move out of that pattern. And usually it's by being the opposite, right? And let me take it back. It's not, I'll give you an example. It's not always about being the opposite. For instance, if you find yourself a codependent in a relationship with an abusive person, like if you don't leave people and you would never break up with a person who's abusive and nasty to you, the answer and the way out is not, to become nasty to others, right? So you have to use your discernment. But the answer is to build boundaries and stop tolerating things that you're not meant to tolerate. There are a lot of commonalities, as I'm seeing and seeking to provide guidance, around self-love and not settling and choosing yourself and filling your own cup. Not from a perspective of narcissism, because there is a lot of narcissism wounding also coming up for humanity, but filling your own cup from the perspective of self-care. This concept of parenting yourself, mothering yourself, fathering yourself, doing kind of like nurturing and taking care of yourself the way that you want to be taken care of, right? So you have to be that first domino of change. You cannot change anybody else. Instead, actually, in fact, in the end times, the only person you're responsible for changing is you. Because every single person that shifts not only shifts their lineage, but the person shifts all of the people that they touch. So it's really, truly a domino effect. And of course, there are a whole lot of lineages that want to complete their karmic loops as well. And so one thing that is very common for the end of the cycle is all kinds of ancestral work. Communicating to the ancestors, rituals with the ancestors, clearing up the ancestors, etc., because the work that you're here to do in this lifetime is not only on your behalf, but it is on behalf of your lineage. So it's a very dense, charged period. I wanted to see if there are any questions from the collective around the end of the cycle, anything that I can help clarify, anything that would serve the collective. I'm here to receive the question. So the question is around fame and people wanting to become famous. Specifically, the question is, so what is that shadow that, fame allows you to work through? And how do you know that it's you're becoming successful? Edit. There's not one shadow. In fact, fame potentially touches at least 5 lower chakras, right? So if your own facet of wounding around fame is in the root, then what you have to overcome is being safe, feeling safe around your fan base, or feeling safe around crowds, right? So some people with a deep set safety issue may choose being in the spotlight, being a public figure, because they will align with a lot of crowds. And if they have wounding in past lives where they have been ostracized or stoned by the crowds or exiled or anything, where their community did not accept them, that may get triggered, right? So if that is the wounding, if that is your wounding, then for you, feeling safe and building that sense of security from within, despite the fact you're in a crowd, despite the fact you're getting all this attention and all this scrutiny, that would constitute a win. For somebody who goes into fame with a broken heart, and they're trying to get validation from others, and they're trying to fill up their heart with the love of others and get this acceptance and get the admiration because they don't love themselves, the lesson is to learn to love themselves. And usually with these types of people, there will be the rise and there will be the fall. Meaning they would have, call it a successful movie or something. And then that movie is going to be a hit for a couple of years, and the actor, actress, or whomever, the director, may get a lot of recognition for that. But then there will be the fall, meaning then there may be the dry period where they don't get cast or they don't get any work or nothing ends up happening for 10 years. And so they get that shot in the arm of public love for that to be taken away. And that is a challenge for those people. Because that is when you truly have to be 1,000% in and committed to yourself, to loving yourself, and to finding that love despite the absence of external success, right? So that could be a challenge. Some people go into fame to work through the shadow of their throat chakra, their sense of self-expression. Specifically, just to give you an example, it could be that you don't think that you, as who you are lovable, likable, or what have you, and so you would choose to wear a mask, right? In interviews or whatnot, you would not show your true and authentic self, right? And with these kinds of people, what would happen is an expose. What would happen is potentially the cancel culture. What would happen is in some way, shape, or form that inauthenticity is going to bubble up to the surface, and they're going to have to deal with the circumstances, right? So it's a lot of tests and trials and tribulations. And then, of course, for these people, stepping into their truth and discarding the mask is going to be the most healing experience ever, right? There are a lot of people who would be tested around self-worth, which is the yellow, which is the solar plexus chakra. And that, again, is going to be around, do you have self-worth regardless of the ups and the downs in your career? Do you have self-worth and sense of self-esteem regardless of what the tabloids say about you or what trolls say in the comments about you, et cetera, et cetera? So there's a whole lot, right, that this can enable for you. And actually, even the fascination with celebrity, right? All of these famous people and all of and everybody just following them and obsessing over them and reading the news and, obsessing over what they wear and who they're dating and all of that good stuff, right? Of course, not everybody is going to get to be famous in this one particular lifetime. But even through watching a famous person closely enough, and that's why you have reality TV and reality TV stars, you are able to work through some of the shadows that they're also working through the mirroring principle, right? So if you get really absorbed by watching the Kardashians or, any other reality TV show, it is because a portion of your own shadow is in resonance to the shadow of whoever you're watching on TV. And as they're going through their experience of being in the public eye and the scrutiny that comes with it, if your hero or whoever you're watching, whoever you're following, I guess, gets their own personal healing journey, gets that prize at the end, then you may get your own resolution as well, right? So it's healing vicariously through another, right? Through the mirror neurons, that is also very possible. That's why you have a lot of fascination with celebrity and people wanting to mimic them and be like them. And part of it is also the perception that, they've figured out something that you haven't. And by, wanting to dress like them or smell like them or look like them, etc., you are inadvertently or maybe intentionally absorbing a part of their emanation, a part of their vibration, a small imprint of who they are, and that may help you on your own healing journey. And that is why there are so many people in the public eye these days, because there are so many people looking for imprints of somebody who has done it before. I'll give you an example. Let's say that in your past lifetimes, you have lived below the poverty line more times than you can count. And of course, in this lifetime, that prevents you from aligning with a rich lineage. So you're going to be born to a people with very modest means. This would probably also mean that for your life partner, you're not going to attract a multimillionaire, right? Like, because like attracts like. So most likely you're going to end up with somebody from a similar type of background. Now, if your higher self wants you to figure out the energy of abundance, what do? And the answer is you find people on social media or on TV or on Netflix or wherever that have what you want, or at least you think that they do, so that you could subconsciously copy that imprint, place that inside of your body, and start working through your issues, right? The imprinting is actually a very, very good old concept that works in humanity. The mimicking, right? The becoming like someone. And that can become your stepping stone, right? So first you observe someone, absorb their energy, and then you can start changing your actions, changing your circumstances. All of a sudden, you may start having or attracting money in real life. I wanted to see if there are any other questions from the collective around the end of the cycle. The answer is, so when will the cycle truly end? Like I said, there are many cycles that are converging. Some have already ended. Some are only going to end. Like, for instance, the solar cycle is technically, the masculine sun is technically at the very, very end because the female sun is already here. So we can consider that cycle complete and the new cycle has begun, right? So there is no one correct answer to your question. But call it in the next 100 years. So we still have another 100 years at least to work through a lot of the karma. Which also means that, potentially your higher self has a few more shots to be incarnated into this time-space reality, this pivotal moment in time, especially if the first couple of attempts of working through the karma didn't work out. So you can repeat and do it one more time, changing just a few of the variables. Is there another question from the collective about the end times? The question is, how can we most optimize how quickly we're going through karmic lessons? I don't know that I love the concept of quickly going through karmic lessons, because I don't think it's about quickly. I think it's about thoroughly, right? Because for these kinds of times, there are like maybe 3 to 5 major things that you need to get right in your entire life, and that's it. And you're golden. Because it's usually like bigger things that you're going to be working on, like big, massive patterns, not smallish ones. Yes, you can fix small ones, but they're not going to really move the needle. So that's not what you should be obsessing about. So there are 3 to 5 main karmic patterns that you really, really want to release, or your higher self wants you to release. And so they usually don't hit you all at the same time. And so rationally, right, if you figure it out and just like do the math, right, you would normally have about, 10 years, give or take on average, to work through a karmic knot. So it's not about quickly, it's about thoroughly and all the way, right? Untying even one karmic knot, but doing it all the way so that you never have to go back to that pain ever again is golden. That even if you do that all the way, it's already a win, right? Anytime you can check off a box, it's in your highest good and it's great. So don't rush the healing process. I will tell you that being intuitively guided and being guided by your own higher aspect is really paramount in the end times. Meaning, things like meditation, things like spending time in introspection, things like journaling are all of the things like ritual, ceremony, all of these things lead you with healings, all kinds of healings, pilgrimages, all of these things take you closer to getting the intuitive guidance from spirit on how to best move forward and what to do in certain circumstances, right? But you can't fake it. That's the thing about the end of the cycle. You cannot fake it. You're either fully on board and fully healed by the end of it, or you're gonna potentially have to start it all over again, the entire experience. So from that perspective, right, going within is really the road. Going within is really the path. Daily meditation is a really, really good practice because that enables you to connect with your inner self. And that's actually really, really paramount because in the end times, the outside and the circumstances and the events of the outside world become very loud because usually they are catalysts for change, right? And so you want them loud. The universe wants them loud. God the Almighty wants them loud. Source wants them loud. Everybody wants them loud because you're supposed to be triggered. That is the entire purpose of this song and dance. However, when the outside becomes so loud, your inner voice becomes quieter. And so that's why you need all of these boosters around mindfulness and spirituality and meditation and everything, right? Ritual, ceremony. You need all of those things in order to be able to hear the voice of your own soul, because that is the guidance that you need, right? Your true guidance is not really going to come from the outside, right? The circumstances will, but how you act in those circumstances and what is your own path is going to come from within. I hope this was helpful. If you're watching this on YouTube, please let me know, how this has been landing and what you have resonated in the video. And if you truly resonate with this concept of the ending of the cycle, and if not, let me know what you're thinking. Sending you a big virtual hug, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye, guys.